Southwest of New Vegas, there stands a site that marks the boundary between the new California Republic and the Mojave Wasteland. This compound serves both as a watering hole for caravans and as a military checkpoint to guard the way into the NCR. I'm the Irresolute Cartographer, and this is the story of Mojave Outpost. In this video, I'm going to detail the nature and history of Mojave Outpost, the people that occupied the site, and the quests that might bring the courier to the site. With that said, let's get started. Mojave Outpost lies on Interstate 15 at the southwestern corner of the version of the Mojave Wasteland we get to explore in Follett, New Vegas. It's an NCR military post consisting of two larger buildings, the barracks and the headquarters, 7 booths, a shade, a rest area for transient caravanners and their Brahmin, and the Unification Monument. Aside from the gated fence running across I-15 at the edge of the map, of the rest of the buildings, only the Caravan Rest Area and Unification Monument appear to be post-war structures. The site appears to have been an agricultural checkpoint for traffic running from Nevada into California. For those who don't know, because of the importance of California agriculture to the state and the nation at large, there are special measures in place to protect the industry. These checkpoints are intended to prevent pests and plant diseases that might cause crop failures from making their way into the state. While in-game, the checkpoint is located on the hill rising out of the Ivanpah Valley, the closest real-world agricultural checkpoint is actually located in the valley, southwest of Primm and northeast of the junction with Nipton Road. I believe that the Nevada Highway Patrol Office, oddly located in California, is a good approximation of the real-world location of the checkpoint. We can see a perfect reason as to why the checkpoint is on flat ground in the real world. In the early morning hours of Saturday, October 23, 2077, a line of traffic was built up at the checkpoint running down the hill into the valley below. This line was filled with personal vehicles and trucks carrying soda, cars, generators, motorcycles, alcohol, and cattle. When the bombs fell, much of the Mojave was spared destruction thanks to Robert House's missile defense system. Despite this, the vehicles appear to have been disabled by electromagnetic pulse, leaving them frozen in time, forever stalled on this stretch of desert highway. This is how things stayed for the next near 2 centuries. In 2271, the Desert Rangers approached the NCR seeking assistance with a growing threat. Caesar's Legion, an army of slaves led by a man calling himself Caesar, was rampaging across Arizona. Every tribe that stood in their path was conquered and impressed into their forces. Though the Desert Rangers had been fighting the Legion's rise, they were clearly outmatched. They agreed to join the NCR Rangers on the condition that the NCR protect New Vegas and the southern Mojave from Caesar. The Unification Treaty signed that day brought more NCR attention to the region. When it became clear that Hoover Dam was intact and that it was still holding up the mass of water known as Lake Mead, and that the lights of New Vegas could be seen glowing in the night, the Republic moved in to take the territory in 2274. When they arrived at Hoover Dam, they found an army of tribals and robots ready for a fight. These defenders, soldiers of Robert House, were there to secure a treaty of their own with the Republic. In the end, they peaceably handed over the dam to the NCR in exchange for 5% of the electricity generated and water pumped being sent to New Vegas, as well as autonomy for the Strip itself. This meant that the Republic got the lion's share of the resources, but also effectively became the defenders of New Vegas. As the Republic expanded eastward, Mojave Outpost moved from Frontier Outpost to Rearguard, blocking access to uncontested NCR territory in the Republic's efforts to bring the region to heel. In 2277, the Unification Treaty was put to its first real test when Caesar's Legion assaulted the NCR forces holding Hoover Dam. The Battle of Hoover Dam ended up a tactical victory for the NCR, but the Republic was unable to press the attack and push the Legion back. Thus, for 4 years, the NCR reinforced their position in the Mojave, while the Legion schemed and tested their borders. In an effort to better supply their forces, the NCR attempted to restore railroad service between California and Vegas. To facilitate the repairs to the rail lines, they employed prison labor. They housed these prisoners, convicts from across the NCR and the Mojave, at the refurbished prison they called the New California Republic Correctional Facility. Over time, as the guards were drawn away from the NCRCF to reinforce the front, the prisoner-to-guard ratio got worse and worse. This lack of proper supervision exacerbated the theft of explosives used to clear the rail lines of debris. In September 2281, the problems reached a head and the prison was overtaken by the prisoners. The convicts burst forth and overtook I-15, using the prison as a fortress from which they struck passing caravans. When they robbed the limestone quarry in Sloan of their dynamite, the site was quickly overrun by deathclaws. These monstrous lizards then took over the highway, blocking any passage to New Vegas along the interstate. Unaffiliated escaped cons also attacked the small settlement of Primm, bringing chaos to the town. Caravan traffic shifted east to Highway 95, putting the convoys at risk of being attacked by the Legion. Though the NCR had held the Legion at bay at the dam, they had crossed the Colorado River to the dam's south, creating a beachhead at Cottonwood Cove. From there, the Legion began to hamper all efforts of the Republic in the southern Mojave, including destroying the major NCR communications center in Searchlight, Nevada. They even pushed west over the hills into the Ivanpah Valley, attacking the unaffiliated settlement Nipton, California. When the Legion slaughtered the inhabitants of the small town and set bonfires in the city, the smoke could be seen all the way from Mojave Outpost. With the growing danger on the trade routes, Ranger Jackson, the overall commander of Mojave Outpost, was forced to halt all northbound caravan traffic. This was the state of things when the courier arrived. Once a courier from Mojave Express, they had been ambushed, robbed, tied up, shot in the head, and buried in a shallow grave in Good Springs. Having survived the attack, they were now on a journey of revenge, hunting the man who had shot them, the man in the checkered suit. This hunt had brought them down I-15. Though they believed that the man had gone east through Nipton, the site of the Unification Monument across the hill was a beacon that drew the courier in. Passing the stalled traffic, the courier reached the top of the hill where they found Sergeant Kilbourne patrolling the highway. The man was quite bored by his assignment, calling the outpost a big Brahmin pen for caravans, and his job watching a lot of nothing. He noted that the caravans north had been stopped by dangerous road conditions and waiting for their clearance papers to go through. When the courier asked about the outpost, the sergeant recommended the barracks as a good place to shake the dust of their journey off. He also noted that someone named Major Knight could repair their gear if need be. The courier thanked him and checked out the plaque explaining the Unification Monument. Sergeant Kilbourne hadn't thought much of the behemoth, calling it good for shade but not much else. The courier followed the sergeant's advice and headed into the barracks. The building was host to a bunk room and a bar, with troopers consistently moving about the area. It was at the bar that they met the outpost bartender Lacey. Lacey was just as frustrated with the caravans being at a standstill as the caravanners were. She'd been hoping that, stuck in one place, she would get all their business, but they had clamped their purse strings down tight. After ordering a drink, the courier noticed that there was another person at the bar, a young woman with a trio of empty whiskey bottles at her side. Her name was Rose of Sharon Cassidy, or Cass for short. She was a caravaner who had had her caravan burned to ashes in the wastes south of New Vegas. Luckily, she had been in Mojave Outpost at the time. Unfortunately, though her caravan was gone, she was still legally a caravaner, and thus was stuck in the outpost. When asking Cass if there was any work to be done in the outpost, she shared that both Rangers Jackson and Ghost likely needed assistance. While Jackson was in the headquarters building next door, Ghost was on the very roof of the building in which they sat. She also suggested that the courier seek caravanning work with the Crimson Caravan. Cass is a potential companion of the courier, and I made a separate lore video covering her story. Regardless, the courier said goodbye to Cass and Lacey. The courier headed upstairs and found Ranger Ghost watching the road north. The Pale Ranger was a sniper who spent her time on Overwatch just waiting for raiders and legionnaires to step into her sights. When the courier asked her about things in the outpost and back home in the NCR, she related that she was bored with life in the outpost and that she wasn't interested in talking politics. She was concerned with the smoke she saw rising from Nipton, and she wanted to check it out. The courier asked why she hadn't done anything about it, and Ghost explained she'd love to go out and fight, but previous efforts in that arena had yielded disciplinary action in the past, and she wasn't interested in that. The courier agreed to check it out, but headed over to the headquarters to meet Major Knight and Ranger Jackson first. Whatever the original purpose of the barracks, the headquarters was clearly some sort of office attached to the checkpoint pre-war, filled with small rectangular rooms. At the front desk, the courier met Major Knight. The Major was both the chief administrator of the outpost and a capable repair technician. When he wasn't shuffling paperwork, he was fixing arms and armor for a fee. Though he finds the work mind-numbing, he knows there are far worse posts to get, such as those poor souls stuck in Camp Forlorn Hope. Back in the old offices, the courier met the outpost's commanding officer, Ranger Jackson. Jackson was locked in a tangle of bureaucratic red tape. On one hand, with the roads being so dangerous, he had to seal off transit to the caravans, a very serious issue as the NCR needed the supplies they carried. On the other hand, he couldn't clear the danger on the roads, as though he had a sizable contingent of troopers, he was mandated to retain those forces within the garrison of the outpost. Stuck in an unwinnable situation, he requested the courier assist him in clearing the roads. An issue in itself, as he also wasn't allowed to hire outside contractors. He offered to hand over some misplaced supplies if they would help. The courier agreed, and with 2 missions for 2 rangers, they departed. They headed back down into the Ivanpah Valley and encountered a group of giant ants at the junction of Nipton Road and I-15. After gunning the enormous arthropods down, the courier headed east towards Nipton on their recon mission for Ranger Ghost. They'd been heading this way before the Unification Monument drew their attention. As they reached the midway point between I-15 and Nipton, they were attacked by members of the Jackals gang. After they put down the attempted ambush, the courier continued east. The smoke was becoming more and more evident in the sky, and the air was beginning to fill with a worrying scent, burning flesh. As they reached Nipton, they met a man who was running from the town, cheering. His name was Oliver Swanwick, and the escaped con from the NCRCF was happily exclaiming that he'd won the lottery. The man continued out into the valley, and the courier entered the town. Let's just go ahead and quote a little piece of my video on Nipton for this next part. The courier walked past the decapitated heads of the people of Nipton towards the burning pile of refuse and corpses that stood in the middle of the street. Seeing the road heading to the town hall lined with crucified men, the courier turned in that direction. Near the town hall, they could see a handful of men in red. As the courier approached the town hall, these men were joined by a man wearing a coyote headdress, clearly their leader. The leader assured the courier that they wouldn't be harmed. He had a job for them: spread the news of what the Legion had done here. He told them the story about how the wicked, debased, and corrupt town had fallen to the Legion. Rejecting the notion that any in the town were innocent, he called Nipton a town of whores. He referred to his deal with the mayor and how it had facilitated his takeover of the town. In the end, he and his cadre of men and dogs marched east, back towards the river. If you're interested in the rest of that story, check out my video on Nipton. Anyway, the courier watched them go before turning back to bring bad news to the Mojave Outpost. The first one to hear these ill tidings was Sergeant Kilbourne. The sergeant, having previously been simply bored before, was clearly terrified by the news, but thanked the courier regardless. They still had to update Ranger Ghost on the situation, and thus they related what they had seen to her as well. Also disheartened by the news, Ranger Ghost thanked the courier. With the story of the fall of Nipton spread, the courier had one more thing to do in Mojave Outpost, and thus they brought Ranger Jackson the good news of dead bugs. He thanked them for their help and, unable to legally pay them, handed over some supplies that fell off the back of a truck. With that, the courier had toured the border post and was ready to return to their mission of revenge. They departed Mojave Outpost, and after once again walking through Nipton, were on their way again. Alright, that's enough on the narrative, but I have some notes before closing things out. First, there are 4 quests that involve the Mojave Outpost that I did not list in the narrative. These quests are Birds of a Feather, Heartache by the Number, My Kind of Town, and You Can Depend on Me. Birds of a Feather, Heartache by the Number, and You Can Depend on Me all involve Cass and are covered in that video. For the sake of this video, I'll give summaries. Heartache by the Number is Cass's companion quest. In this quest, you work to unravel the forces behind the destruction of her caravan and bring them to justice. This can only be advanced once she leaves Mojave Outpost. To free her to travel with you, you have to rid her of Cassidy caravans, something that can only be accomplished through its sale. Convincing Cass to sell is part of the second stage of the Crimson Caravan Company's side quest, You Can Depend on Me. In one version of this, the road has to be made safe, meaning the roads have to be cleared of giant ants in Ranger Jackson's quest, Can You Find It in Your Heart? Meanwhile, the third stage of Birds of a Feather involves the courier being sent by Jean-Baptiste Cutting, head of security for Silver Rush, to bring Cass to him. She has to be free to travel, meaning she has to be a companion to make this happen. Lastly, in quests related to Mojave Outpost, in the side quest My Kind of Town, the courier can visit with Major Knight to clear the way for the NCR to annex the town of Prim, turning Sergeant McGee into Prim's new sheriff. Alternatively, the courier can request a pardon from Myers, allowing the sheriff turned convict to become the new sheriff of an independent Prim. Second, there are some inconsistencies in the lore that frustrate me. Let's run through these. A. How the danger on I-15 is presented and handled. There's danger on the road, so Ranger Jackson shuts down traffic, just as he's mandated. However, he can't do anything about the issues because his men are stuck manning the outpost, also by mandate. It's a great way to show the bureaucratic inefficiencies of the new California Republic. However, how he has the courier help with these issues is nonsensical. The issues that are making the road unsafe are primarily the powder gangers ranging out from the NCRCF raiding caravans, and the death claws that have seized I-15 north of Sloan. His response to these issues is, go kill the giant ants at the junction of I-15 and Nipton Road. Once that section of road is safe, it still seems to be closed to traffic. It would have been preferable to have a full quest chain here. The chain should start using the killing the ants as the way to prove the courier's skills. Once that's done, it should have incorporated helping Prim, clearing the threat from the NCRCF, and clearing the death claws. I get why they might not want to throw this at the courier when they first hit the Mojave Outpost. Taking on death claws is no easy feat. However, they could have easily tied it to rep. Increasing levels of rep leads to unlocking the quests. This would have generally helped to keep the lowest level players out of the quest. Regardless, you can take care of Prim, the NCRCF, and the death claws on your own. And this elicits no response from Ranger Jackson. He only cares about killing the giant ants. B. Cass being stuck in the outpost, needing the courier to clear the ants to leave. Though Cassidy Caravan's lone caravan was destroyed, Cass is classified as a caravan, and thus she can't leave the outpost with the roads in so much danger. It shows more of the stupid red tape within the NCR. However, when attempting to purchase the caravan from Cass, she refuses to leave if the courier doesn't take care of the ants, saying Ranger Jackson won't let her leave if the road is still dangerous. Does the no leaving status apply just to caravans or not? If she sells, she's no longer a caravan. If she can't come and go as a free citizen, why can the courier come and go? There are also still caravans headed towards New Vegas, primarily on Highway 95. I see it as being likely that these guys were the last ones to make it through the outpost before the gates shut. Third, I was considering why there are so many vehicles waiting in line at the agricultural checkpoint, and I came to what I think is an interesting thought. What if the cars were waiting for the border to open for the day? The bombs fell quite early in the morning on the West Coast. It could well be that there was a line because these drivers were waiting for the checkpoint to open to admit them to California. I wouldn't be surprised if the agricultural protections were stricter at the time, both because of the war and because of the food shortages. I think it's entirely possible that the few cars that are on the other side of the road were people who panicked and attempted to flee the site when the bombs came down. The tipped tractor trailer is attached to a semi that is angled as though it could have been turning around. Anyway though, I think that's enough on the notes, let's close things out. The Unification Monument stands as both a tribute to the Ranger Unification Treaty and as a hopeful vision of the future. This symbol of the union between Eastern forces and Western forces towers over the compound that demarcates the boundary between the New California Republic and the Mojave Wasteland. Only time will tell if the Western Territory and the Eastern Territory followed the example of the Rangers and unified. Alright, I think that'll do it for this video. Follow me on X for lore video announcements at Gaming with Maps. My Discord is open to the public, there's a link in the channel's banner. I stream every Friday evening on YouTube, come check it out if you're interested. If you appreciate what I do here and you want to support the channel financially, you can become a member on YouTube or a patron of Patreon. I want to thank my channel members and patrons Mesothelioma, 76 of Texas, Dark Malcontent, Real76, Samsung Smart Fridge, Night Spearhead, Electric Head, Hero Cunning, Laced Cake, Osborne and Bread 73, Clay, Prince Julius, and Doc Vanguard Voyager for their support. Thank you to those of you who have made super chats and super thanks as well. Apologies to those who have super thanked that I have missed thanking in previous videos. I finally found that part of the YouTube creator interface. I also want to specifically thank Dark Malcontent for helping with this video's script. This has been the Irresolute Cartographer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.